Good morning, everyone. Dumelang baithuti, goeie môre, almal. Ladies and gentlemen, it is that time of the year where we look back at what has been happening throughout the year and try to wrap up and get ready for the end of the year examination. Grade 12 learners, I want to take this moment to wish you well and to say you've come thus far, and this is the moment that you must now focus and get ready to give it your all. And how can I forget the grade 12 teachers who have worked so hard this year? So this is the moment that we have all been waiting for, and I must say, when you look at the timetable, it works in our favor because for years in our subject business studies, we've been complaining and of course been uncomfortable with the fact that our subject has been put towards the end of examinations. But this year, who would have thought that our subject would be written on the 28th, which is the second subject after English shall have been written. So it works in our favor. You get ready, and I've got no doubt you are all oiled up like a machine. So for today, we are going to focus on final preparations for Paper 1 Business Studies, Grade 12. These are final preparations. And my presentation will focus on the following. We are going to look at the documents that we draw all that we are talking about from. Those documents remain very important because you've got to, every now and then, to refer to those documents. We'll also look at the scope. What will Paper 1 be covering? We'll also look at the date and the structure of the paper. And then we move further to look at the commonly asked topics and diagnostic report thereof. What does that mean? It means these are the topics that year in, year out, they are there. And who knows? I may be talking about topics that will definitely appear in the examination. And when it comes to diagnostic report, I'm actually trying to also give you tips because there are mistakes that are normally committed by learners or by candidates on specific topics. So we'll be looking at those commonly asked topics and mistakes that they normally do and how to sort of avoid committing such mistakes when you answer the questions. And we'll also look at approach to essay writing, and then we wrap up with a conclusion. All right, let's look at the topics. Not the topics, but the documents. We've got the amended CAPS policy document, which was implemented as of January this year. So whatever we are talking about here was drawn from that document. We also have got the 2021 examination guidelines document. This document is important because it contains content that you learners will be assessed on. The whole examination will be based on this 2021 examination guidelines. And I'm sure, and I've got no doubt that your teachers have taken you through this document, and teachers have also taken note of topics or content or aspects of the content that have been taken out of the examination guideline in 2021, but they were there in 2020 or even in previous years. So this 2021 examination guideline is important because you focus on it because your examination is going to come from this document. And of course, you've got amended or amendments to notes. You've got notes that were given to grade 12 learners, and subsequent to that, there were also amendments in 2021. And I hope your teachers have taken you through the amendments, because amendments now they are talking to the latest content in as far as specific aspects of the curriculum is concerned. So these three documents are very, very important, and that's where this preparation is being drawn from. So every now and then, refer to these documents to make sure that you are in line and you are ready for your examination. And now let's look at the scope. I can't say much. What I can tell you is that paper 1 is divided into 2 broad topics. Paper 1 covers business environments and also covers business operations. Business environments has got the following subtopics: impact of recent legislation on business, business strategies, and business sectors and their environments. This content is going to form part of paper 1 under business environments. And then business operations, you have human resources function and quality of performance. The two will also form part of business operations. So your paper 1, the scope is made up of the 2 broad topics, which is your business environment and your business operations. And I'm also saying to you, the beginning of the year, you were given the annual teaching plan. So all first and second terms topics, as per the ATP, we all know that your business environments, like your legislation, strategies, and sectors, they are covered in term 1 and term 2. And even your human resources function and quality of performance, they all of your paper 1, these topics, according to the ATP, they are covered in term 1 and term 2. That's why I'm saying all first and second terms topics as per the ATP. However, the focus being your business environment and your business operations. So that's, in a nutshell, your scope. Let's now move to the date and the structure. When you look at the date, paper 1 will be written on the 28th of October 2021, which is next week, Thursday. So you now have got no time. You now have got a little bit of time to wrap up now and to finally prepare yourself for the examination. And the structure stays the same. The structure does not change, and it's important to remind you of the structure, even though some of you may feel, no, we already know the structure, but it's important. The structure of the paper 1 is going to be divided into 3 sections. You're going to have section A, B, and C. Section A is compulsory, and it covers multiple choice for 10 marks, choose the correct word for 10 marks, and match for 10 marks, and the total marks for section A is 30 marks. It is compulsory, and estimated time you can spend on section A is 30 minutes, and the cognitive level of questions in section A is mostly level 1 and level 2. So section A is compulsory, take note of that. Section B, that's where you have a choice. You are going to be provided with 3 questions, but expected to choose 2. So you choose any 2 questions in this section, and each question, it carries 40 marks. So you'll be fighting for 80 marks here. And what are kind of the questions in section B? In section B, you have direct questions, including scenarios. That's where you are going to come across a lot of scenarios in section B. And most of the scenarios, they also expect you as a learner or as a candidate now to apply the content that you have already gathered. You know the content. Now can you apply the content of the knowledge? And these 3 questions, 2 covering each main topic. What does that mean? It means, for example, question 2, it will be based on business environments. Question 3, it will be based on business operations. And then the third question will cover both main topics. We call it miscellaneous. It will be a combination of business environment and business operations. Estimated time you can spend on this question or on this section, it's 60 minutes. It means because you are answering 2 questions, you must spend at least 30 minutes in each question. If you spend more than 60 minutes, more than an hour, you are likely now to put yourself under pressure to cover other sections of the paper. So make sure that you don't spend more than an hour in this section. And it covers level 1 to 6, meaning all your cognitive levels are there. You start from your, straightforward and simple questions up to your kind of difficult, high-order questions in this section. And unfortunate enough, in this section, you have a choice. You have a choice to make. I can't tell you which questions to answer or to choose, but my tip to you would be, look at the questions in section B, go through them, and finally make a choice of 2 questions. When you scan through the questions, you'll be able to see whether you can score enough marks, whether you have enough content, whether you can answer a lot of questions depending on the question that you choose. So make a right choice. Make sure that you choose a question where you've got enough facts, where you can score enough marks, where you are comfortable, and so on. And I've got no doubt, and I have hope in you that you've already prepared yourself for this section. And then the last section in the structure is section C. Again, in section C, you have a choice. And now where you have a choice, it means you've got that latitude to weigh options and then make it a decision. So you'll be provided with 2 questions here. The type of questions in section C is essay questions. You'll be provided with 2 essays, expected to choose one from the 2. Each essay will be based on a particular broad topic. For example, the first essay will be on business environments, and then the second essay will be on business operations. So the examiner may choose any subtopic from any of the broad topics, and by now you know what makes business environments and what makes business operations. And an essay, it carries 40 marks, and because you are choosing one essay, the maximum time, or estimated time you can spend on this section is 30 minutes. So the cognitive levels in this section, or in these questions, it covers level 3 to 6. So essay, they cover your middle to even high order questions. And the total for the paper is 150 marks, and time is 120 minutes, which is your 2 hours. So I think 2 hours is more than enough for you to do your best. And I've got no doubt you are going to do exactly that. So enough about the structure. You know by now what to expect in as far as that is concerned. Let's now go straight to the first topic. And I must caution you. I'm saying to you here, these are the commonly asked topics and the diagnostic report thereof. And these topics that I'm going to talk about, all of them here, you are likely to come across these questions in section B questions, and or even in section C. So when you prepare yourself and when you go through these topics, you must, at the back of your mind, remember that you may come across these topics either in section B or even in section C. All right, the first topic there under business environments, it falls under legislation. The content there is the impact of legislation. The impact of legislation. The examiner may pick any act, but for the purpose of my presentation, I've decided to make an example with one question focusing on a particular act. Let's take, for example, the question says, discuss the impact of Basic Conditions of Employment Act on businesses. That is one of the acts. This is an example. The examiner may come, may ask you a question on impact on any act, but it will be a bonus should you come across the question exactly the same as this one. Now, When we talk of the impact, the mistake that learners normally do, and that I want you to avoid, make sure that when we talk of the impact, we are not saying you must explain to us what the Basic Conditions of Employment Act is. But the moment you see the word impact, what should come to your mind is advantages and disadvantages, or positives and negatives. And the good part about a question like this one, where you are asked to discuss or explain the impact, the good part about it is that the examiner is giving you that opportunity. You can either focus on the advantages or on the disadvantages, or you can combine them both. So it works to your favor, because then you can score marks, because you can combine or you can focus on one of the two. Now let's look at possible answers that we are looking for when a question says the impact, discuss the impact. In this instance, discussing the impact of Basic Conditions of Employment Act on businesses. Let's look at the advantages, because your responses should show that this will impact positively, or it will be an advantage on the side of the business. Let's take a look at the first bullet there. It says the Basic Conditions of Employment Act, the advantage, the positive impact thereof is that it creates a framework for acceptable employment practices. For example, work hours, leave, and so on. So we all know what the Basic Conditions of Employment Act is all about. The positive part of it to the business is that it creates that framework, because if there is no framework, the business is likely to, to be offline. But because it gives that framework, it creates that framework of acceptable employment practices. It gives guidance. It's an advantage to the business. Let's take a look at another advantage. It promotes fair treatment of employees in the workplace, because it talks about conditions, basic conditions. So it's a plus to the business. It's an advantage to the business, because it promotes that fair treatment of employees in the workplace. And we know if employees are unfairly treated, what will happen? Furthermore, it encourages consultation between employers and employees. So it is an advantage in that it encourages the two parties to consult one another. And if there is consultation, definitely there will be harmony. There will be that working relations between the two, the employer and the employee. So it works in the favor of the business. It's a positive to the business. Furthermore, it outlines minimum requirements that form the basis of an employment contract. We all know that the moment as a business you hire employees, there should be a contract. Now, the Basic Conditions of Employment Act, it outlines minimum requirements that form the basis of an employment. It gives guidance. It's a plus. Let's come to, and these are some of the advantages, they're not all. Let's look at some of the disadvantages. How will this act now negatively impact on the business? For example, developing or drafting a formal or legal employment contract may be time-consuming or even costly. This is a disadvantage, because the Basic Conditions of Employment Act, it outlines what should be in a contract and so on. Now, drafting or developing a legal employment contract is time-consuming, because you must make sure that you don't miss on what should be included in an employment contract, and you don't want to contravene the act itself. Some of the disadvantages, again, businesses may regard employment contracts as negative and may not implement it, which results in non-compliance or even penalties. You may be tempted to be negative about employment contract as an employer, as a business. And the moment you do that, you end up not implementing it as you are supposed to, and this may lead to non-compliance And if you do not comply, you know what will happen. There will also be penalties. So this is how this act will negatively impact on the business. Another disadvantage, no employer may force an employee to work more than 45 hours in a week, as this may result in reduced productivity. We all know that the Basic Conditions of Employment Act, it stipulates working hours for employees. Now, because of that, as an employer, you cannot force anybody to go beyond the stipulated hours, and this may also impact on productivity. Now you can see it's negatively impacting on the business. So when you come up with the impact, make sure that it drives that point where it shows that this can affect the business negatively, or it can affect the business positively. So the impact is important. Look at the advantages and disadvantages, and the examiner may pick on any of the act as part of our content, but I just took this as an example. And I hope you will not commit a mistake when you come across a question that requires you to discuss or to explain or to talk about the impact. Let's move to the next content. This one still on legislation, the content being compliance. In our curriculum, we all know that you've got to study acts, and compliance with the acts is also very common when it comes to assessment. The examiner may focus on any act, and for the purpose of my presentation, I've decided to focus on the compliance with QOIDA as one of the acts which you've got to prepare yourself on. The examiner may choose any act. It can be compliance with Employment Equity Act, Labor Relations Act, Skills Development Act, and so on. But let's focus on QOIDA. Now, the mistake that candidates or learners normally do when it comes to this question, they tend also want to discuss or explain what the act is, and that's not what is required by the question. The question wants you, for example, here it says, advise the business on ways in which it can comply with the act, in this instance with QOIDA. The possible responses that we are expecting from candidates or from the learners include, amongst others, the following. Business should provide a healthy or safe working environment. The moment the business does that, it means it is complying with QOIDA, because QOIDA it's about injuries that will happen, or even death that can happen as a result of the type of work that employees are doing at workplace. So if the business provides a healthy and safe-working environment, it is indeed complying with QOIDA. The business should register with the Compensation Commissioner and provide the particulars of the business. The moment the business registers with Compensation Commissioner for claims and so on, it is indeed complying. The business should keep records of employees' income and details of work for at least 4 years. The business should keep those records. If it does that, it is indeed complying with QOIDA. The business should submit returns of earnings not later than the 1st of March every year, annually. They must submit. The business should also pay the levies to the compensation fund. If the business does that, it is indeed complying. The business should ensure that the premises or equipment or machinery is in good working condition, because if the machinery is in good working condition, you won't have injuries in the workplace. The business should allow regular assessment of the workplace by inspectors in order to determine the level of risk their employees are exposed to. When the business does that, it is complying. The business must ensure that claims are lodged within 12 months of the date of the accident. If an accident happens, and there's a claim that has got to be lodged, it should be done, lodged within 12 months. Otherwise, it becomes too old or stale for the business to claim, to lodge such a claim. So all these, they make sure that the business is in compliance with QUAIDA as an act. So make sure that you get ready if you come across a question demanding you to discuss or to advise or whatever, in as far as compliance with legislation is concerned. Don't make mistake. You now know how to answer such a question, and who knows, a question on compliance may be there. Get ready for that. Let's move to the next content. Here the content is Skills Development Act. Skills Development Act, it is still under business environment. With Skills Development Act, this question is common and learners commit mistakes. A question is all about the role of SETAs. Outline the role of SETAs in supporting the Skills Development Act. What mistakes are normally committed by learners? The learners, instead of coming up with the role of SETAs, they normally provide the purpose of Skills Development Act and they get it wrong. So I'm saying to you, don't make such a mistake. Remember, we are talking about SETAs here, the role that they play. The responses that we are expecting, amongst others, include the following. SETAs, their role is to do what? To develop sector skills plans in line with National Skills Development Strategy. SETAs, they are expected to do what? As part of their role, to draw up skills development plans for their specific economic sectors. They are also expected to approve workplace skills plans and annual training reports. They are also expected to allocate grants to employers, education and training providers. They are also expected to pay out grants to companies that are complying with the requirements of the Skills Development Act. So these are some of the responses that we are expecting should a question like this come up in the examination. Don't make a mistake of providing the purpose of Skills Development Act. We are not talking about the purpose here. We are talking about the role of SETAs. Let's move to the next content. Still on business environments. Here, BBBEE pillars, Broad-Based Black Economic Empowerment Act. We're still talking about acts here. Now, this question, for example, saying explain the implications of the following Broad-Based Black Economic Empowerment Act pillars for businesses. Normally what learners do, instead of providing the implications, they tend to confuse implications with impact. There's a difference between the two. When you talk of impact, we've talked about it earlier on. You are looking at the advantages and disadvantages, or the positives and the negatives. But when you talk of implications, you are referring to what is the business is expected to do going forward. Now, here it is with regards to BBBEE pillars, and the pillars have been mentioned here. For example, management control as a pillar. What is it that the business is expected? What is the implication? For example, the businesses must ensure that transformation is implemented at all levels when it comes to management. Business is expected to do what? To appoint black people in senior management positions or to management. The business is expected to involve black people in the strategic decision-making process. As you can see, all the points that I've made mention of, they link to management control. If you provide these responses, then you are 100% on point. You are answering the question. Let's go to Skills Development Act as a pillar. The implication there. The business is expected to do what? To engage black employees in skills development initiatives. The business is expected to provide learnerships or learning programs to black employees. You see, it links with skills development. The business is expected to contribute 1% of their payroll to the fund, to fund the skill development program. All these, they link to what? Skills development. And this is the implication. I hope a question such as this one, when it, you come across it, you will not make a mistake of coming up with advantages and disadvantages. You'll be coming up with the implications. And you must pay attention, because the examiner may focus on other pillars that I did not make mention of. Here, for the purpose of giving an example, I focused only on management, control, and skills development. Remember, you've got other pillars. Focus on them and make sure that you answer correctly as expected, and don't make a mistake of not answering properly when it comes to this question. Let's move to the next content. Very common. This question has been there. If my memory serves me well, it was there, this question, in the provincial test, the very first test that you wrote in March. It was there. It was there in June. It was there in September. Evaluation, it's about strategies now. Evaluation of business strategies. If your question says, outline steps in strategy evaluation, the mistakes that learners do when it comes to this question, they focus on the development of strategies. The responses that they put there tend to mix or tend to focus more on how to develop a strategy than on how to evaluate. Remember, when you evaluate, you have already implemented the strategy. You are checking whether it worked or it did not work, whether it yielded the desired results or not, and what can you do, and so on. You are evaluating. So make sure that you answer this question correctly. Should a question such as this one be there in the examination? The responses, some of the responses that we are expecting when you evaluate strategies include, amongst others, the following. Examine the underlying basis of a business strategy. The business should actually critically look at that strategy, because when you do that, you are sort of evaluating. They go deeper now and examine the underlying basis. What was the basis of the strategy? Look forward and backwards into the implementation process. Now you look at how did you implement. You also look at you look forward into the implementation process. This will help you evaluate whether the strategy was good or was bad. Compare the expected performance with the actual performance. We are talking about a strategy here. Because you are evaluating, you compare. This is what was expected when we implemented the strategy. But these are the results. This is the actual performance that we got. You are comparing. Is there sense in the two, or is there a difference between the two? And what kind of a difference between the two? Between the expected and the actual. Measure the business performance in order to determine the reasons for deviations and analyze these reasons. You also look at the performance in order to determine the reasons for deviations. When you talk of deviations, it means the business did not achieve what they wanted to achieve. They deviated from what? From that they wanted to achieve. What were the causes for the deviations? You look at all of those. When you do that, you are busy evaluating a strategy or strategies. And then the business should do what? Should take corrective action so that deviations may be corrected. The business should now say, okay, this is now what we are going to do. We are correcting the mistakes that we have done. We have implemented the strategy. It did not work. We make mistakes here and there, and this is how we correct going forward. So as you can see, all the responses, they point to what? To the evaluation of a strategy. Set specific dates for control and follow-up. When you set dates for control, when you control and you do follow-ups, you are now checking whether things went well or did not go well. Draw up a table of the advantages and disadvantages of a strategy. Because you are evaluating, you're looking at the positives. Did we get anything out of the strategy? Or what were the disadvantages? What were the negatives of a strategy? Decide on the desired outcome. You decide now, what is it that we want to achieve now? Consider the impact of the strategic implementation in the internal and external environments of the business. And of course, any other relevant answer related to the steps in strategy evaluation. So all these, they give you steps. You are evaluating strategies. And the good part with this question again, that will work in your favor, is that you are normally not expected to put steps in a particular order. Whichever, you can mix this order. There is no order, and you get awarded full marks for steps, for as long as you have outlined those steps. That's what is important. So I hope you will not make a mistake when it comes to this question. That still forms part of business environment as content for paper 1, but focusing on strategies when you evaluate strategies. Let's move to the next content. Still under strategies, the content being industrial tools. This question, I think it was asked in the first control test, and learners generally did not do well in this question. Please, what were the mistakes committed by learners when answering this question? The learners, instead of answering the question, they were explaining the personal factors. For example, what does political factor mean? What does economic factor mean? What does technological? That's not what you've been asked. Don't make a mistake. The question says, explain any personal factors. Explain how any personal factors pose challenges to the business. Now, you must now explain how each factor poses a challenge to the business. Let's take, for example, political factor or political factors. Some of the challenges that this factor may pose include, amongst others, for example, some government policies may affect business. Remember, under politics, political factors, you've got politics and the government features there. And the government decides on policies. If the government comes up with policies that will impact on your business, this poses a challenge because some of the policies may negatively affect your business. And remember, we are talking about the personal factors here, and they form part of the macro environment. It means the business does not have control on this. Consumer rights organizations may prevent businesses from selling products if they do not meet certain requirements. This forms part of political factors. These consumer rights organizations, if they prevent business from selling products, if they do not meet certain requirements, and so on, this poses a challenge. This factor poses a challenge to the business. The business may end up suffering. The business may end up not achieving what it wants to achieve because of this. So this factor, it poses a challenge in that manner. Trade agreements may prevent businesses from importing some products, for example, medicine and so on. This is also a political factor, and it poses a challenge in that manner. So I hope it makes sense, and you are still linking what I'm saying to you with the question itself. Are we addressing what you have been asked? Done about the political factors. Let's come to the economic factors. For example, inflation or interest rates may negatively impact on the business. This is how this can pose a challenge to the business. In inflation, the business does not have control over inflation or even interest rates, and this may negatively impact on the business. That's how this poses a challenge as an economic factor, as part of the pestle to the business. Loans, for example, may be expensive due to high interest rates. If a business goes out there and obtains a loan and the interest rates gets increased, the loan will be expensive because the business will have to pay too much interest now on that loan. Does the business have control over that? No. But this is how this poses a challenge to the business. Fluctuations in foreign currency may restrict imports, for example. This also links with the economic factor. And it poses a challenge to the business in that manner. Let's go to the technology. Technological factors. For example, the business may not keep up with or may not be aware of the latest technology, and this may pose a challenge to this pestle factor of technology. So you see what we are expecting from you when you have to answer this question. Employees may not be skilled to operate or maintain new technology or even equipment. I mean, if new machinery or technology has been introduced in your business and your employees are not skilled, this will definitely pose a challenge to your business. It will negatively impact on your operations as a business. And technology, do you have control over it? No, you don't. So all these, they pose a challenge in that manner. The business may not be able to afford even new technology. If the business cannot afford new technology, this is how this factor poses a challenge to the business. I hope my explanation makes sense to you, and should you come across a question such as this, you'll definitely be in a position to answer it properly. Don't make a mistake of now coming to explain the pestle factors. That's not what the question requires of you. What it requires of you is to demonstrate how these factors pose challenge to the business. Let's move to the next content. Still under strategies and on industrial tools. This one, very common also. And it focuses on, for example, one of the tools which is Potter's 5 forces. And the key word there is application. If a question says, explain how businesses can apply, how the business can apply Potter's 5 forces model to analyze their position in the market. I've just taken an example of one of the forces. Let's pick on this one, bargaining power of suppliers or power of suppliers. And please don't make a mistake. When you are asked to mention or even to discuss, or you are asked a question such as this, when you mention a force, you must mention it in full. For example, you cannot say suppliers. If you say suppliers, you will be marked wrong, because here the force is power. The key word is power of suppliers or bargaining power of suppliers. So make sure that you write even the force correctly. Otherwise, you forfeit marks unnecessarily. Now, how can a business apply, for example, this force to analyze its position in the market? The first point there, we are saying that the business should assess the power of suppliers. They are now applying. The business should assess the power of suppliers in influencing prices, because the more powerful the suppliers, the less control the business has over them. I mean, there are so many examples you can think of. If you are running a business and you've got suppliers who supply your business with whatever. If they've got power, it means those suppliers, they can even influence. You know, they are influencing prices. And if they influence prices, definitely you as a business, you don't have power over them. And because they've got power, that it poses a challenge. So you must assess that. That will help you analyze your position in the market. You must assess the power of the suppliers in influencing prices. By so doing, you are now explaining how this POTAS 5 force can be applied. The second point there, the business should evaluate suppliers that deliver high quality products, as they may have power over the business. We all know that suppliers that are very, very good in delivering high quality products, they definitely, most of the time, have power. So you must evaluate these suppliers, because all that we want to see happening, we don't want the business, to be overpowered by suppliers. That's why the key word there of the force is that power of suppliers. So you must evaluate the suppliers that deliver high quality product, as they may have power over the business. The next point there, the business should consider suppliers who may be small in number, as they may be more powerful because the choice of suppliers may be limited. I mean, if you are running a business and you are having these suppliers who are not many, they are small. Those small suppliers, they may have power over your business because the choice of suppliers is limited. You don't have many. You've got limited number of suppliers. So they group themselves together and they become very powerful. So you must consider that. You must look at that as a business. And by so doing, you are applying. Because when you apply this POTAS 5 forces, it will help you analyze your position in the market. Identify the kind of power suppliers have in terms of the quality of products, services, reliability, or even ability to make prompt deliveries, and so on. Identify that kind of power of suppliers that they have in terms of that. That will help you analyze your position in the market, and by so doing, you are focusing on this force, bargaining power of suppliers or power of suppliers. So when you come across a question like this, make sure you answer it properly. Otherwise, don't make a mistake of explaining what bargaining power is all about. That's not what the question is requiring of you. The question requires you to explain how this can be applied. It talks about application of the force. And I've just made an example of this force, but there are other forces, because we're talking of 5 POTAS forces. So look at all of the forces, and I also cautioned you to write the force in full. Let's move to the next one. Very common, this one also. On business environments, focusing on the sectors, business sectors, and their environments. And the content there being challenges or environment or even extent of control. And I've taken here a scenario, for example. And this question is very common and it carries marks. But learners or candidates, most of the time, they get it wrong. They get it wrong because you are normally given a scenario and it's all about application, and you are also provided with a table. Let's go through the scenario. For example, Brian Bakery, BB. Brian's Bakery produces fresh birthday cakes. His employees lack good customer service. He lost most of his customers to Cynthia Bakeries. BB had to replace some of its stolen equipment due to the high crime rate in the area. That's the scenario. Now the question says to you, code challenges from the scenario, classify the challenges according to environments, and also determine the extent of control the business has over the environment. So you can see it's about 3 in 1. You've got about 3 questions in 1. Now let's look at the challenges, the responses that we are expecting in as far as this question is concerned. Challenges: his employees lack good customer service. It's a challenge. And where do we get this from? From the scenario. It's a challenge. And this challenge, when you classify it, where does it fall? When the business employees lack good customer service, it's a micro. It falls under micro environment. And the extent of control is that with micro, the business have full control. The business can definitely, correct the situation, can look at that challenge, can deal with that challenge. It's a micro challenge. Let's go to the second challenge. Where do we get it from? From the scenario. He lost most of his customers to Cynthia Bakeries. Now, when you look at Cynthia Bakeries, it means Cynthia Bakeries is a competitor. Now, if the business lost most of its customers to the competitor, we are talking about competition there. And this is a challenge. Where does it fall? It falls under the market environment. And what is the extent of control? Does the business have control? No, the business has limited control or little influence. That's the extent of control. And the last challenge there, BB had to replace some of its stolen equipment due to the high crime rate in the area. Where do we get this challenge from? From the scenario. It is also a challenge. But when you look at this challenge, where does it fit? It fits under macro. Why? Because when you look at that challenge, it talks about crime. Does the business have control over crime? No. It falls under macro. And the extent of control? No control. The business does not have control over macro environmental factors. So this is how you should go about answering a question such as this. Don't make a mistake. It's a very common kind of a question and it carries marks. And read through the scenario carefully. Look if you are being provided with a table. Put your responses in a table because they make it easier for you to answer and they make it easier for the markers to mark. And I think so far we have covered more than enough topics under business environments. We are going to take a break now, and when we come back, we'll now be focusing on the other broad topics because our focus has been on business environments. We are now going to focus on business operations, the topics that fall under business operations. Let's take a break now. Thank you very much. All right, welcome back from the short break. We are continuing now with the second part of my presentation, which will focus on the other broad topics, which is your business operations. Now, under business operations, let's focus on human resources function. For example, there is this content on job analysis. Job analysis. It's a very kind of content that is very common. And I'm also wondering, how come learners get this wrong? And I'm saying to you, should you come across a content like this, a question like this, make no mistake. For example, if a question says differentiate between job description and job specification, what is important there is for you to explain how, what makes the other different from the other one. For example, job description, for you not to get it wrong. Job description has got to do with duties and responsibilities. It describes duties, the responsibilities of a specific job, or a summary of the nature or the type of the job. Key word there under job description, it's duties and responsibilities. I'm not sure if you've heard somebody saying, you know, I'm working, but this is not part of my job description. You know, job description has got to do with what you have to do at work, your day-to-day duties, your responsibilities. That's what job description is all about. On the other side, job specification, it describes the minimum acceptable personal qualities, skills, or even qualifications needed for the job. With job specification now, think of the qualifications, think of the skills or personal qualities that are needed for the job. So the moment you get that distinction right, you'll never go wrong. You know, should you come across a question such as this, whether it is in a form of a question like differentiating or in a form of you explaining or whatever, you will never get it wrong because you clearly know the difference between the two. Under job description again, you can say it's a written description of the job and its requirements. On the other side, job specification, written description of specific qualifications. You see, qualifications, skills, even experience needed for the job, they've got to link with job specification. So don't get this wrong, get it right, and should a question such as this, whether it's in section B or section A, it crops up, don't make a mistake of not getting all of those marks. The next topic is also very common under human resources. The content is employment contract. Now, for example, this question says, discuss the legal requirements or legalities of an employment contract. The mistake that learners or candidates normally do is, instead of coming up with the legalities, they provide the contents or aspects of an employment contract. There's a difference between the two there. When you talk of legal requirements or legal, we want to know what makes an employment contract legal. What makes it legal? When you talk of aspects or contents of an employment contract, now you are talking about what should be contained in an employment contract. But here, we are talking about all of those aspects that make it legal. Hence, legal requirements or legalities of an employment contract. So, don't make such a mistake. And some of the responses that we are expecting include, amongst others, the following. An employment contract is an agreement between the employer and the employee, and it is legally binding. You know, the moment you say it's legally binding, you are enforcing and you are clarifying what makes this legal. What makes an employment contract legal? Because it's an agreement between the two parties and it is legally binding. That is a legal requirement. The employer and the employee must agree on any changes of the contract. This makes an employment contract legal because they must agree, the two of them. That's what the law requires. The employer and the employee must agree on any changes to the contract. Aspects of the contract can be renegotiated during the course of the employment. That's what makes it also legal. No party may unilaterally change aspects of the employment contract without consent of the other. So it boils down to the point that I highlighted earlier on, that the employer and they must agree on any changes. No party may just, from nowhere change the aspect of the employment contract without the consent of the other. This is a legal requirement. This is what makes an employment contract legal. The employer and the employee must both sign the contract. There must be proof that they have signed. It makes it legal because that signature is a commitment from the two of them. The employment contract should include a code of conduct and code of ethics. The employer must explain the terms and conditions of the employment contract to the employee. This is part of the legal requirements of the employment contract. And then lastly, we are saying the employment contract may not contain any requirements that are in conflict with the basic conditions of Employment Act. It means an employment contract should not by any way or in any way contravene the law or the acts, and with a specific reference to basic conditions of Employment Act. So these are some of the responses that we are expecting when it comes to this question. Don't make a mistake of not getting all of your marks. You can have this question in section B or even in section C. The next content or the next possible question, it's on selection process. In this instance here, under selection process, we are looking at the interview. This question is common. It's commonly asked, but candidates or learners mostly don't get it right or make mistakes. The examiner will simply play around with two words there. We've got the interviewer. When we talk of the interviewer, we are referring to the business or the employer. The interviewee, when you talk of the interviewee, you are referring to the candidate now, the candidate. So you must also get the difference between the interviewer and the interviewee and read the question clearly to establish what is required of you before you answer. Let's take, for example, this one. Explain the role of the interviewer during the interview. So here we are talking about the employer or the business. When? During the interview. During is key there. For example, some of the responses that we are expecting will include the following. Allocate the same amount of time to each candidate. Who does this? Is the employer or the interviewer? The interviewer allocates the same amount of time to each candidate. This is happening when? During the interview. The employer or the interviewer introduces members of the interviewing panel to each candidate or to each interviewee. The interviewer makes the interviewee feel at ease, because we all know that, interview can be an intimidating process. It is the responsibility of the interviewer to make the interviewee feel at ease. This is happening when? During the interview. The interviewer must explain the purpose of the interview to the panel and the interviewee. The employer or the interviewer must record the interviewee's responses in order to decide whether to appoint or not to. This is happening when? During the interview. In an interview, there's scores, people are being, they keep records of scores and performance of interviewees during the interview. And this will help the employer or the business or the interviewer to make a decision of either appointing or not appointing the candidate. This is happening when? During the interview. The employer or the interviewer must not mislead the interviewee, especially when asking questions. The interviewer must avoid discriminatory or controversial type of questions. For example, asking a female candidate about family planning or having children and so on. This is just to say the employer or the interviewer, this is his role or her role, must make sure that they avoid, they go straight to the point. They don't come up with questions that are way offline. They must provide an opportunity for the interviewee to ask questions, and they must close the interview by thanking the interviewee for attending the interview. So when you look at all these responses, they are addressing the question, because the question wanted to find out what would the role of the interviewer during the interview be. So don't make a mistake, because candidates, they do what? Instead of providing the role of the interviewer during, they may provide it before. And if it is before the interview, it means it is in the planning stage. So look at those responses. The examiner will simply play around that, and don't fall into the trap of being a victim of the tricks of the examiner. Read the question clearly and know exactly that this is about the interviewer. Sometimes the question may be on the interviewee, and the interviewee, I said, it's the candidate, him or herself. Still on business operations, very common kind of a question also, on salary determination methods. For example, a question saying, distinguish. To distinguish is to also differentiate between the two. Distinguish between piecemeal and time-related methods of salary determination. If you come across a question such as this in section B or section C, take advantage. We've talked about it. Don't make mistakes. Pocket all of those marks. For example, when you talk of piecemeal salary determination method, under this, it means workers are paid according to the number of items or units produced or action performed. The number of units is key there. That's piecemeal. On the other side, time-related, it means workers are paid for the time they've spent at work or on task. So time is key there. So you see the difference between the two. On piecemeal, workers are not remunerated for the number of hours worked, regardless of how long it takes them to make the items. On the other side, time-related, workers with the same experience qualifications are paid on salary scales regardless of the amount of work done. Here, time is very, very key there. So make sure that you strike that difference between the two salary determination methods, and you don't make a mistake when you answer such a question. The next one, remember earlier on we had a question on implications. Here comes implications now. Here the content is implications of legislation on HR. Here we will be focusing on a specific act, which is Employment Equity Act. If your question says, explain the implications of the Employment Equity Act on the human resources function, don't make a mistake of coming up with advantages and disadvantages. This is not about the impact, but it's about the implication. What is expected of the business going forward now? Some of the responses we are expecting would include the following. The human resources manager, because you are talking about the HR function here, must promote or provide equal opportunities in the workplace. You see, it links with Employment Equity Act. If the human resources manager is doing that, that's what is expected of him or her. That's the implication. The human resources manager or the business must now ensure that affirmative action promotes diversity in the workplace. We all know that affirmative action is part of Employment Equity Act. The employer or the human resources function, they must compile employment equity plans that indicate how they will implement affirmative action. This is the implication. The business or the human resources function should assign a manager to ensure that the employment equity plan will be implemented regularly or even monitored regularly. The business or the human resources function or manager should display a summary of the act where employees can clearly see it, have access to it. They must report to the Department of Labor on the progress in the implementation of the equity plan. They must conduct medical or psychological tests fairly to employees when deemed necessary, or even promote equal pay for work of equal value. That's the implication. I hope you see the responses now. That's the implication. That's what the business is expected to do going forward. And I've just focused only on Employment Equity Act, but there are other acts. The examiner may focus on the implication of, for example, Skills Development Act or Basic Conditions of Employment Act and so on. So it's important that when you come across a question saying implications, you answer it properly. The next one there. Now we are done with HR. We are moving still under operations. We are going to quality of performance. Very common. This one is about the concepts. Quality concepts is the content. And you know that you've got quite a number of concepts. You've got quality control, quality assurance, quality management, and so on. The examiner will focus on any of the quality concepts. Now, for example, if a question says differentiate between quality control and quality assurance, make sure that you answer it properly. When it comes to quality control, you are referring to a system that ensures the desired quality. It ensures that the desired quality is met by inspecting the final product at the end. In fact, the final product to ensure that it meets the required standards. That's quality control. When you go to quality assurance, you are referring to checks now. Those checks and balances, the checks carried out during and after the production process to ensure that required standards have been met at every stage of the process. So I hope you get the difference between the two. Here, quality control is a system to ensure that the desired quality is met by inspecting the final product. The key word is the final product. But with quality assurance, you are referring to those checks that are carried out during and after. You can also say under quality control, checking raw materials, employees, machinery, workmanship, production to ensure that high quality standards are maintained. On the other side, quality assurance, processes put in place to ensure that the quality of product systems adhere to pre-set standards with minimal defects or delays or even shortcomings. I hope you get the difference between the two. The examiner may focus on other quality concepts, like I've already mentioned, quality management and so on. Just be on the lookout and be ready for a question on those or on that content. Very common kind of a question. Also this one, it's on the TQM elements under quality, TQM elements. For example, this is kind of a question which is also heavily loaded. If a question says, discuss the impact of the following TQM element on large businesses, and the element is stated. In this instance, we are referring to total client or customer satisfaction is the TQM element. Remember, we've got other elements. A question may focus on a different element. This is just for the purpose of my presentation and for clarity. I focused on total client satisfaction. And remember, impact, we talked about it earlier on. It refers, you have to look at the advantages or disadvantages or positives and negatives. What are we expecting? For example, remember, whatever you provide must link with total client satisfaction and must be an impact where? On large businesses. Look at the first response. Large businesses. You see, it links already with the question. Large businesses use market research or customer service to measure or monitor customer satisfaction or analyze customers' needs. Why do you say large businesses use that? Because they can afford, they are large, they can afford that. The market, and it's a positive impact on total client satisfaction, because they use surveys and so on to get a feel or to analyze how customers feel and so on. It's a positive impact on this TQM element. On the other side, look at the disadvantage or the negative impact. Employees who seldom meet customers often do not have a clear idea of what will satisfy their needs. And this makes a lot of sense, because here we are talking about large business. You know, in large business, you've got many customers. And you find that because there are many customers, employees, they seldom meet customers, and they do not have a clear idea of what will satisfy the needs of their customers. You see, that's the negative impact of this TQM element on large business. Let's go to the other one. As an advantage, large businesses may be able to gain access to the global market. Large businesses, you know, because they are big, they can even go global because they are big, meaning that they can even have clients and customers as far as other countries. That's the positive impact of this TQM element. On the other side, not all employees may be involved or committed to total client satisfaction. Because the business is big, not all employees may be involved or committed to satisfying clients. That's the negative part of this TQM element. The last one there, continuously promote a positive company image. You know, large businesses, they continuously want to promote a positive company image. And this links with total client satisfaction, because this will definitely be a plus to the business. If customers have a good image about the business, they'll definitely come back and back and back and back. And then on the other side, monopolistic companies. You know, companies which monopolize are those that sort of dominate, you know, have an increased bargaining power. So they do not necessarily have to please customers. You know, if you take a look at big companies that, let's take, for example, Eskom. I'm just making an example. We know Eskom it's a parastatal, but it's also one of the companies that are big. And if Eskom is the sole provider of electricity in South Africa, it is dominating, it is monopolizing the market, it has got increased bargaining power. So it does not necessarily have to please the clients. That's the disadvantage. That's the negative impact of this total client satisfaction on large businesses. I just made an example of Eskom as an example, but you've got many other examples that you can think of. So make sure when you answer this question, you answer it properly, because it talks about the impact. You must look at advantages and disadvantages. You must link your responses to what? To the large businesses, and you must always focus on the element that has been mentioned. In this instance, total client satisfaction and so on. Let's come to this one. Still on TQM. It's a very common question also. It's about implementation of TQM. The question says, discuss the negative impact. And I think it is clear there. It says the negative impact. The moment you say negative impact, it means all the responses that you are going to provide, they are going to be negative. Negative impact on business if TQM is poorly implemented. What will happen to the business if it implements TQM poorly? These are the responses. Lack of training or skills development may lead to poor quality products. You see, if a business implements TQM poorly, it does not train workers, does not give skills development, definitely the business will do what? Will produce poor quality products. It's a negative impact. If the business does not implement TQM properly, there will be a decline in sales as returns from unhappy customers increase. There will be that decline in sales. Also, there will be a decline in productivity because of stoppages. I mean, if the business does not implement TQM, TQM properly, there will definitely be stoppages. It means that the business does not take into account the importance of quality in the business. Definitely, there will be a decline in productivity because there will be stoppages. Bad publicity due to poor quality products supplied. There will also be bad publicity. People will know that this business is not producing good products. And it's as a result of the business not implementing TQM properly, poorly implementing it. Unrealistic deadlines may not be achieved. Undocumented quality control systems, processes could result in error deviations from preset quality standards. So all the responses, as you can see, they are negative, and it is as a result of the business not implementing TQM properly. So this is a common question. Don't make a mistake. If you are asked to discuss the negative impact, don't make a mistake of trying to explain what TQM is. The question is not about TQM. It's about the negative impact if this TQM is poorly implemented. Still on quality of performance, and again on TQM implementation, this is now the other side. Advise the business on the benefits. Now the benefits you are referring to, the advantages of a good quality management system. It's a common question. Learners do not do well in it. I'm wondering why. The responses that we are expecting will include, amongst others. And look at the responses. They are all positive. Effective customer services are rendered, resulting in increased customer satisfaction. Can you see it's an advantage? It's a benefit because the business is having what? A good quality management system. Time and resources are used efficiently. Productivity increases through proper time management using high quality resources. Products or services are constantly improved, resulting in increased levels of customer satisfaction. Vision, mission, or business goals, they will definitely be achieved because the business has got a good quality management system. So all these are positives. When you answer this question, you must know that whatever you are going to mention here is going to be a benefit. It's going to be positive on the side of the business. Business has a competitive advantage over its competitors. Regular training will continuously improve the quality of employees' skills or knowledge. Employers and employees will have a healthy working relationship, resulting in happy or productive workers. Now, we're done about some of the topics under business operations. I want us to move to the next phase now of essays, because whether you like it or not, you're going to come across essays. And I must tell you, make sure that you make essays your friend, because that's where you can get marks. And there is nothing stopping you from even starting your answer, starting to answer with an essay. After reading the essay, after making a decision, you can start with an essay. Remember what you talked about earlier on time management. Make sure that you don't spend more than an hour because you're going to select one essay. Now, this is just a tip on how you must go about answering an essay. For example, an essay must have introduction, must have body, must have conclusion. It is important that your essay, you literally write the words introduction and you write the words conclusion. Most of the time, learners forfeit marks. They simply go straight into answering an essay without having written the word introduction or even conclusion. If you have those words, you already have got 2 marks for layout. So you can see you benefit. When you answer an essay, make sure that your essay, you break it down. What will help you make the question, to break the question down, is to look at the bullets, because we are going to look at an example of an essay, a previous essay. In an essay, you are going to be given bullets, about 4 bullets. You are going to be provided those bullets. They represent questions or instructions. Now, each bullet, if you break the question down to show understanding, it means you will make a subheading with each bullet. If you do that, you already have got 1 mark. And if you score more than 60 in an essay, you already have got the 2nd mark. So you can see you benefit 2 marks also for analysis and interpretation. So make sure that you read the essay, you look at those 4 bullets, those are your instructions, and you already have got subheadings for each instruction in your essay. That will help you break the question down in what has been asked. And then in your essay, make sure that you are relevant to the question. Because every time you bring anything irrelevant to the question, you will forfeit marks for synthesis. But if everything that you present is relevant to the question, you already have got 2 marks for synthesis. If there are facts that are relevant and there are facts that are not relevant, you'll definitely get 1 mark for synthesis. If whatever you present is not relevant, you're going to get 0 for synthesis. And then lastly, examples. Make sure that you provide relevant example per sub-topic or per sub-question. What do we mean by that? In your essay, if you answer an essay, you provide an example on the first bullet, you will get 1 O for originality. And then if you provide another example in another bullet, you'll get another O. We simply mean you cannot provide 2 examples or more than 2 in 1 bullet, in 1 instruction. You'll get only 1. So make sure that you provide examples per topic or subtopic based on recent information and current trends and developments not older than 1 year. It's important. So this originality kind of thing, it's important, and you can discuss this with your teacher. Make sure that you look at the question and you link that with recent information and you provide relevant examples. You'll definitely get your marks for originality. Still on essays, let's take an example here. This is just an example of a previous essay. Delta Manufacturers has a vacancy for a sales executive. The human resources manager implemented the selection procedure after compiling a job analysis. Prospective candidates were invited to an interview. Fringe benefits were offered to the successful candidates. This is the background information that you are given. It's not a scenario. It's not a scenario, it's a background information. That background information, it gives you insight as to what will the question be based on. Here is the instruction. Write an essay on the activities of the human resources function in which you include the following aspects. Now you see the bullets that I talked about. I talked about 4 bullets. Here you've got 4 bullets. The first bullet, it says, outline the selection procedure as a human resources activity. You see, you can already, in your essay, when you answer, have a subheading for that bullet, like selection procedure. Then you discuss that, or you outline the procedure. The second bullet, explain the 2 components of job analysis. You already have the subtopic for that also in your essay. The next bullet, discuss the role of the interviewee during the interview. That's the third instruction. And then lastly, evaluate the impact of fringe benefits on Delta manufacturers as a business. So you've got 4 bullets. Those are your 4 instructions. And you can already have your subheadings in your essay. Remember, I said you must have introduction. Apart from introduction and conclusion, you must have these subheadings in your essay. And that counts for 40 marks. This is an example of a previous question. What is it that you must do when you start to answer? It is important to have a mind map. There is an example of a mind map there. And you can even draw your mind map in your essay, but you will not get any additional marks for that. In the middle there, it shows that your essay or this essay is based on human resources. The first instruction was about outlining the selection procedure. It means you note already that in my essay, as part of my first subtopic, I'm going to have a subtopic where I outline the selection procedure. The second instruction was about job analysis. Explain job analysis. In the job analysis, what are you going to do now? You are going to have a subtopic for that and explain that. The next instruction was about the role of the interviewee. That's your third instruction. You have the subheading for the role of the interviewee, and you are going to discuss that. And then the last instruction, or the last bullet, was about the impact of fringe benefits. Evaluate the impact of fringe benefits. That is your last subheading. So with your mind map, you know already that, okay, in my essay, I'm going to have introduction, and then I'm going to talk about selection procedure. I'm going to talk about job analysis. I'm going to talk about the role of the interviewee, and I'm going to talk also about the fringe benefits. So once you do that, you are on point and you are definitely going to answer the question as expected. So that's the mind map. You can do the mind map, whichever way you do it. But it helps you because your mind map is your rough draft or your rough plan. And you can't just jump into answering the essay without having a plan first. So that rough plan or draft is important as your mind map. Now, the introduction. I've just decided to also guide you on the introduction. When you come up with the introduction, make sure that your introduction is linked to the bullets. That will make your introduction to be relevant. For example, let's look at the first introductory statement in this introduction. The human resources manager is responsible for selecting and appointing competent and skilled workers. You can link this with the first bullet in the question. The first bullet was about selection procedure. Can you see that? And then the second introductory statement, a job analysis assists businesses in identifying the details of the vacancy and of the candidate. You link that, it links with which bullet? There was a question, there was a bullet about job analysis. It links with the components of the job analysis. Look at the third introductory statement. The human resources manager should be able to appoint the best candidate if the interviewing process is properly conducted. This statement, it links with what? With the third bullet. The third bullet was about the role of the interviewee during the interview. And the last introductory statement, fringe benefits are offered to employees regardless of regular wages or salaries. It links with what? The fourth bullet of the impact of fringe benefits on the business. Can you see that? So once you learn the skill of coming up with statements as introduction or as conclusion, but you link them with the bullets, you'll definitely be coming up with relevant introductory or relevant concluding statements to your essay, and you'll never go wrong. We do the same with conclusion. For example, a clear job analysis enables the human resources manager to select the best candidate. You can see it is concluding the essay, but it links with what? With the second bullet of components of the job analysis. The goal and objectives of business cannot be achieved without qualified and skilled employees. A well-organized interview process will result in identifying and appointing the most suitable and deserving candidate. You see, it links with that one of the role of the interview. Offering fringe benefits is a great way to motivate employees to work hard towards achieving business goals. This one, it links with what? With fringe benefits. So the trick of coming up with the relevant introduction and the relevant conclusion is also key with regards to your essay. This is how you should approach your essay when you answer. And you can see your introduction and your conclusion will be relevant to what has been asked. And then the breakdown of marks. I just wanted to show you something there with the breakdown of marks. For example, when you go to the margin guideline of this essay, you realize that introduction is awarded 2 marks and conclusion is awarded 2 marks. Now, selection process has been given 12 marks. Components of the job analysis, 12 marks. The role of the interviewee during the interview, 10 marks. Impact on fringe benefits, 12 marks. When you add all of these, they total 50 marks. And then they get reduced to a maximum of 32. Is this a benefit or is it a disadvantage to you? It is an advantage. It's a benefit to you. Why am I saying it's a benefit? For argument's sake, let's say you come up with the correct introduction. You come up with selection procedure, you get 12 marks. You come up with components of the job analysis, you get 12 marks. How many marks do you have right now? You've got 24, 26. Can you see that? And then you come up with the conclusion, relevant conclusion, you've got 28. Can you see that you already have got 28 out of 32, even though you did not answer some of the bullets, or you did not have enough facts on some of the bullets and so on. So the fact that you've got 50 marks and they get reduced to a maximum of 32 is an advantage, because you can even score high marks even though you do not have enough facts on some of the aspects of the question. Now, my advice again to you would be, make sure that on each and every bullet, at least on each and every bullet, you can discuss or you can outline or you can have at least 5 facts on each bullet. That will give you enough to score enough marks depending on what has been asked. But make sure that you have at least it's a minimum of 5 facts in each bullet or in each question that has been asked. That will help you. And then, of course, your insight. We've talked about the lasso, your layout, introduction, and your conclusion, your analysis, your synthesis, and originality. And then they add up to 80. And then when you add 32 plus 8, it amounts to 40. That's how your essay gets marked. And you'll definitely score marks on your essays. You just have to learn the trick of answering an essay and enjoy writing and enjoy answering an essay. And also be careful of your handwriting, so that whoever is going through your work can go through your work without struggling with what have you written. And I'm not saying here you must come up with a fancy handwriting, but I'm saying write legibly. And also remember, when you sit for examination next week, you don't bring any TPEX to the center, because TPEX, it will definitely amount to irregularity. Don't apply TPEX. So those are some of the tips that I can give to you. And this brings me basically now to the end of my presentation with you. I would want to take this time and this moment to sincerely wish you luck with your exams as you will be starting next week. You've come this far, and you can't just let your hard work for the whole year to just go through like that and slip through your fingers like that. This is the moment that you must now focus and work even harder. And I still believe in you, and I've got hope in you. And I'm sure when you look at your performance from September, that gives an indication that you are ready for end of the year examination. I want to leave you with this quotation of a well-known basketball player, American basketball player, Michael Jordan. He once said, I quote, "The more you sweat in practice, the less you bleed in battle," close quote. So work hard, sacrifice, study. I'm telling you, your exams are going to be easier. So with those few words, I want to wish you well and continue to keep yourself safe by observing all the protocols, because we are now living in a moment where we've got to observe protocols all the time for us to stay safe. So good luck, and let's meet again when we discuss and we go through the tips in as far as paper 2 is concerned. I hope when we meet next time, I'll get positive feedback that the tips and my presentation for today really helped you and assisted you to prepare better for next week. So good luck and thank you and God bless.